The most intelligent people in the room almost never know it. That is not humility. That is not a performance of modesty designed to make them look good. It is a genuine, deeply felt belief that they are not as smart as the people around them, that they are faking it, that any day now, someone will look closely enough to see through the act and expose them for what they really are: ordinary, average, nothing special. Just a man who somehow ended up in a room he does not belong in, surrounded by people who actually deserve to be there. If you have ever felt that way, if you have ever sat in a room full of people and assumed you were the least qualified person there, if you have ever dismissed your own insight because it came too easily, or doubted your own ability because no one else seemed to struggle the way you do, then what I am about to tell you might change the way you see yourself permanently. Because that feeling, that quiet certainty that you are not smart enough, is not evidence of low intelligence. It is one of the strongest indicators of high intelligence that psychology has ever identified. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why. You have spent years measuring your mind against the wrong standard. You compared yourself to the loudest voice in the room and assumed volume meant intelligence. You compared yourself to the person with the most credentials and assumed paper meant depth. You compared yourself to the confident one, the certain one, the one who always had an answer ready before the question was even finished, and you assumed that because you hesitated, because you doubted, because you saw complexity where they saw simplicity, that you were the one falling behind, that you were the slow one, the uncertain one, the one who just did not have what it takes. You were not falling behind. You were seeing further. You were processing more. You were holding more variables in your mind simultaneously than the people around you could even identify. And the inability to recognize your own intelligence is, paradoxically, one of the clearest signs that you have more of it than you realize. Here are 5 signs that you are more intelligent than you think. The first sign is that you constantly feel like you do not know enough. While everyone around you seems certain, you feel uncertain. While they speak with conviction, you hesitate. While they have answers, you have more questions. And you interpret this as a deficit, as proof that you have not studied enough, learned enough, experienced enough. But here is what is actually happening. You are aware of how much you do not know. And that awareness, that uncomfortable honesty about the limits of your own knowledge, is one of the rarest and most valuable forms of intelligence that exists. Dunning-Kruger at NYU, along with his colleague David Dunning, identified a pattern that has reshaped how we understand intelligence and self-perception. They called it the Dunning-Kruger Effect. And the finding was devastating in its simplicity. People with low ability in a given area tend to dramatically overestimate their competence, while people with high ability tend to underestimate it. The less you know, the more confident you feel. The more you know, the more you realize how vast the territory of your ignorance actually is. The incompetent do not have the tools to recognize their own incompetence, and the competent are cursed with the ability to see exactly how far they still have to go. Think about that. The man who is certain he has all the answers is almost always the man who has explored the least. He stands at the edge of a shallow pond and calls it an ocean. He has never gone deep enough to feel the pressure, never waded far enough to lose sight of the shore. Meanwhile, you, the one who feels inadequate, the one who lies awake wondering if you are smart enough, the one who reads one book and immediately realizes there are 100 more you need to read. Before you can even begin to understand the subject, you have waded deep enough into the water to feel the current pulling. You know how deep it goes because you have actually been in it. And that knowledge, that awareness of depth, is what makes you hesitate, not stupidity, wisdom. The kind of wisdom that only comes from honest engagement with how vast the world of knowledge really is. As the philosopher Socrates reportedly said, "I know that I know nothing." And that was not the confession of a fool. It was not the surrender of a man who had given up trying to learn. It was the declaration of the wisest man in Athens. Because the first step toward real intelligence is admitting that you will never reach the end of what there is to learn. The men who think they have arrived, who believe they have figured it out, who carry their certainty like a trophy, those are the men who stopped walking long ago. They found a comfortable spot on the road and convinced themselves it was the destination. You are still walking, and the discomfort you feel is not a sign that you are lost. It is a sign that you are still on the path. The second sign is that you overthink everything. You cannot just accept things at face value. Your mind pulls apart every conversation, every decision, every interaction, and examines it from angles that other people never consider. You replay situations. You analyze motives. You see patterns where others see noise, and you exhaust yourself doing it. You wish you could just turn it off. Just be like the people who make decisions easily, who do not second-guess every choice, who move through life without the constant hum of analysis running in the background. But that hum is not a malfunction. It is a feature. Overthinking, when it is not driven by anxiety but by genuine curiosity and pattern recognition, is a hallmark of a sophisticated mind. Your brain does not accept simple explanations because it knows, instinctively, that simple explanations are almost always incomplete. It keeps searching because it is capable of holding complexity that most minds cannot tolerate. Adam Grant at the Wharton School has written extensively about the relationship between intelligence and doubt. And one of his core arguments is this: the smartest people are the ones who rethink the most. They do not cling to their first answer. They do not treat their initial reaction as gospel. They question, revise, update, and challenge their own conclusions more rigorously than anyone else would challenge them. And from the outside, that looks like indecision. It looks like weakness. It looks like a man who cannot make up his mind. But from the inside, it is something entirely different. It is a mind that refuses to be lazy, a mind that holds itself to a standard that most people do not even know exists. Picture this. Two men are offered the same business opportunity. The first man says yes immediately. He is confident, he is decisive, he trusts his gut, and does not waste time with analysis. Everyone around him admires the speed. They call it leadership. They call it vision. The second man pauses. He asks questions no one else thought to ask. He considers risks that the first man never entertained. He lies awake, weighing outcomes and building scenarios and stress-testing the idea against every possible failure he can imagine. The world calls the first man smart, and the second man hesitant. The world calls the first man a leader, and the second man a warrior. But 3 years later, the first man's business has collapsed because he did not see the risks that were obvious to anyone who looked carefully. The foundation had cracks from the beginning, cracks that the second man spotted in the first week. And the second man, the overthinker, the one everyone called indecisive, either built something that accounted for those risks and survived, or walked away from a bad deal and saved himself years of suffering and financial destruction. The hesitation was not a weakness. It was the intelligence doing its job. It was the mind refusing to commit until it had done the work that commitment demands. The third sign is that you are deeply self-critical. You are harder on yourself than anyone else could ever be. When you succeed, you attribute it to luck, to timing, to other people's contributions, anything other than your own ability. When you fail, you absorb it completely. You do not spread the blame. You do not make excuses. You look in the mirror and you see every flaw, every gap, every way you could have been better. And you carry that assessment with you, like a weight that never fully lifts. This is not low self-esteem, although it feels identical. This is what happens when a mind is sharp enough to see its own imperfections with high-definition clarity. Most people cannot do this. Most people's self-assessment is blurry, distorted, generous in the places where it should be honest. They look in the mirror and the mirror lies to them, tells them they are further along than they are, smarter than they are, better than they are. And they believe it because believing it is comfortable. You do not have that luxury. Your mind shows you exactly where you stand. And because the picture is accurate, it is rarely flattering. But here is what you are missing. The ability to accurately assess your own weaknesses is one of the most powerful advantages a human being can have. It means you can correct what others cannot see. It means you can grow in directions that others do not even know exist. It means that while the confident man is repeating the same mistakes because he cannot see them, you are evolving slowly, painfully, quietly, because you can see everything, every flaw, every gap, every area that needs work, and you have the honesty to admit it. That is not weakness. That is the engine of mastery. Every man who has ever become exceptional at anything, every artist, every strategist, every builder, every leader who left something behind that the world remembers did so not because he thought he was already great, but because he saw how far he still had to go and refused to pretend the distance was not there. He looked at the gap between where he was and where he needed to be, and instead of lying to himself about the size of it, he got to work closing it. That is what self-criticism does. When it is harnessed correctly, it does not destroy you, it drives you. And the man who has never been hard on himself has never demanded enough of himself to become anything worth remembering. The fourth sign is that you prefer deep conversation over small talk. You struggle with surface-level interaction. The weather, the weekend plans, the casual gossip about people who are not in the room, it drains you in a way you cannot fully explain to anyone who does not feel it. Not because you are antisocial, not because you dislike people. You like people. You are fascinated by people. But your mind operates at a depth that small talk does not reach. You want to talk about why people do what they do, about what drives someone to build their life the way they built it, about the ideas that keep you up at night and the questions that have no easy answers and the patterns beneath the surface of everyday life that most people walk past without ever noticing. And when you cannot find that depth in a conversation, when the talk stays on the weather and the sports scores and what someone ate for dinner, you feel alone, even in a room full of people. Not because no one is talking to you, because no one is talking about anything that matters. This is not a social deficit. This is an intellectual appetite that most interactions do not feed. Your brain requires a certain density of stimulation to feel engaged. Small talk provides the mental equivalent of empty calories. It fills the moment but leaves you hungry. And because most social interaction operates at that surface level, you spend a significant portion of your life feeling slightly disconnected from the people around you. Not because you are broken, not because something is wrong with you, because you are looking for something that most people do not know how to offer. You are looking for depth in a world that rewards breadth. You are looking for meaning in conversations that were designed for comfort, not connection. And here is the part most people will never tell you. The reason deep conversation is rare is not that people are incapable of it. It is that depth requires vulnerability. It requires admitting what you do not understand. It requires sitting with questions that have no answers and being comfortable in that uncertainty. And most people would rather stay on the surface where everything is safe and predictable and controlled, and no one has to reveal who they actually are beneath the performance they put on for the world. You are the one willing to go deeper. You are the one who would rather have one real conversation than 100 empty ones. That takes more courage and more intelligence than staying shallow ever will. As the philosopher Blaise Pascal once wrote, all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. And the man who craves depth over noise, substance over spectacle, meaning over entertainment, that man is not antisocial. He is not awkward. He is not difficult. He is ahead of a world that has forgotten how to think. The fifth sign is that you are highly adaptable. When life throws something unexpected at you, a failure you did not see coming, a betrayal from someone you trusted, a plan that falls apart so completely that the wreckage bears no resemblance to what you originally built, you do not freeze permanently. You might stumble. You might feel lost for a time. You might spend days or weeks wondering what went wrong and whether you will ever find your footing again. But eventually, sometimes without even realizing it, you adjust. You find a new angle. You rewrite the plan. You discover a way forward that did not exist before because you created it on the spot, under pressure, with nothing but your mind and whatever materials were left after the collapse. And you do this so naturally, so instinctively, that you do not even recognize it as intelligence. You call it survival. You call it common sense. You call it just doing what needed to be done. You call it anything except what it actually is, one of the highest expressions of human cognitive ability. But adaptability is not common sense. It is one of the highest expressions of human intelligence. Because adapting to a new situation requires your brain to do several things simultaneously: assess the new reality accurately, release the old plan without emotional attachment, generate alternative solutions in real time, and choose the best option under pressure. Most people cannot do this. Most people cling to the old plan long after it has failed, because letting go requires a kind of mental flexibility that only certain minds possess. Think about it this way. The man who follows a rigid plan and succeeds is competent. He did what he was told. He executed what was designed for him. But the man who watches his plan disintegrate, who sees the business fail, the relationship end, the career path collapse, the foundation crack beneath his feet, and builds a new one from the wreckage, that man is intelligent. Because the second man is not relying on preparation alone. He is relying on his ability to think in real time, to process chaos without drowning in it, to find signal in noise, to construct order where none exists. That is not luck. That is not instinct. That is a mind operating at a level that most people never access because they never need to. Their plans never fail badly enough to require it. Their lives never break hard enough to demand the kind of thinking that only the broken and rebuilt ever develop. You have been tested. You have been broken and rebuilt more times than you can count. And every single time, you found a way through. Not because someone showed you the path, not because you followed a manual that had the answers, because your mind did what intelligent minds do when the map stops working. It drew a new one, in real time, under pressure, with no guarantee it would work. And the fact that you do not give yourself credit for this, that you dismiss it as just getting by or just doing what anyone would do, is ironically yet another sign of the intelligence you refuse to see. Because most people would not have done what you did. Most people would have stayed down. You did not. Now, I want to tell you about a man who embodied every single one of these signs. A man who constantly felt he did not know enough, who made lists of his own ignorance in the margins of his greatest work, who overthought everything to the point of obsession, leaving projects unfinished for years because his mind would not stop finding new questions, who was so self-critical that he abandoned some of his most brilliant creations because they never met his own impossible standards, who craved depth in a world that rewarded surface, and who adapted to every obstacle, every failure, every rejection, every closed door with a creativity that the world had never seen before and may never see again. His name was Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo was born in 1452 in the small Tuscan town of Vinci, the illegitimate son of a notary and a peasant woman. Because he was born out of wedlock, he was barred from attending a university, barred from joining the professional guilds that would have given him status and credentials and a place in the intellectual hierarchy of his time. He was barred from the systems that were supposed to determine who was intelligent and who was not. By every institutional measure of 15th century Italy, Leonardo da Vinci was unqualified. He had no degree, no title, no formal education in the subjects that would define his legacy: anatomy, engineering, mathematics, physics, architecture. The doors that opened for other men were closed to him before he was old enough to knock on them. He was, by the standards of the world he was born into, a nobody with no right to the knowledge he would spend his life pursuing, and he knew it. Throughout his life, Leonardo referred to himself as a man without letters. He was acutely, painfully aware of his lack of formal training. He felt it as a deficiency that followed him into every room, every workshop, every conversation with educated men who could cite authorities he had never read. He compared himself to the university-educated scholars and philosophers of his time, and saw himself as lesser, not as different, as lesser. The self-doubt was constant and relentless. He filled his notebooks not just with ideas and inventions, but with self-criticism, with reminders of what he had not yet learned, with lists of questions that revealed how vast he believed the gap between himself and real knowledge to be. He made lists of words he did not know. He wrote notes to himself about books he needed to find and concepts he needed to study. The man who would become the greatest polymath in human history spent his life feeling like a student who had not done his homework. But here is what Leonardo did not understand about himself, and what the world would take centuries to fully recognize. His lack of formal education was not his weakness. It was his greatest weapon. Because he was never taught how to think inside a system, he never learned the limitations that systems impose. He did not know what was supposed to be impossible. He did not know which questions were considered foolish. He did not know that anatomy and painting were supposed to be separate disciplines. that engineering and art had nothing to do with each other, that a man was supposed to pick one field and stay in it for the rest of his life like a prisoner who chose his own cell. The rules that constrained everyone else had never been installed in his mind, and you cannot break rules you were never taught. So he ignored all of that, not out of arrogance, out of curiosity. The same curiosity that made him feel like he never knew enough was the exact force that drove him to study everything. He dissected human bodies in the middle of the night illegally, in cold morgues by candlelight, to understand how muscles connected to bones and how blood moved through veins. He watched birds for hours, sometimes entire days, to decode the mechanics of flight. He studied the way water moved through rivers and designed hydraulic systems based on what he observed. He designed war machines, architectural structures, flying devices, and musical instruments, all while producing some of the most iconic paintings in human history. He moved between disciplines the way other men move between rooms, because to his mind, the boundaries between them did not exist. They were artificial. They were limitations created by lesser imaginations. And because no one had taught him those limitations, he simply never accepted them. His notebooks, over 7,000 pages that survived, reveal a mind that never stopped questioning, not for a single day. Every page is a testament to the first sign we discussed today. He never felt he knew enough. Every answer led to 10 more questions. Every discovery opened a door to a larger room of ignorance. And he did not experience this as progress. He experienced it as failure. He died in 1519, believing he had barely scratched the surface. The man who came closer to understanding the full scope of human knowledge than perhaps any individual in history, the man whose drawings anticipated inventions that would not exist for 400 years, died thinking he had not accomplished enough, that he had wasted too much time, that the questions he could not answer outnumbered the ones he could. That is what intelligence without self-awareness looks like. It is the curse of the sharp mind. The sharper it gets, the more clearly it sees everything it has not yet reached. And Leonardo carried that weight his entire life, not as motivation, as burden, as a constant, gnawing sense that he was behind, that he was wasting time, that the real work had not yet begun. Sound familiar? And yet, and this is the part that matters most, he never stopped. Despite the doubt, despite the self-criticism that filled his notebooks alongside his inventions, despite the feeling that he was always behind, always inadequate, always falling short of a standard that existed only in his own extraordinary mind, he kept going. He kept asking questions that no one else thought to ask. He kept drawing, studying, experimenting, failing, and starting again. For 67 years, he kept going. And what he left behind, the paintings, the inventions, the anatomical studies, the engineering designs, the observations about light and water and human movement, changed the trajectory of human civilization in ways that the university-educated, credentialed, certified scholars of his time could never have imagined. They had the degrees, he had the curiosity, and 500 years later, the world remembers his name, not theirs. And this is what I want you to understand. If you recognized yourself in any of these 5 signs, if you feel like you do not know enough, if you overthink, if you are hard on yourself, if you crave depth, if you adapt when others freeze, then you are carrying an intelligence that the world does not know how to measure. Not because the world is wrong, because the tools it uses, grades, credentials, confidence, speed of decision-making, are designed to measure performance, not depth. They measure how fast you can answer, not how deeply you understand the question. They reward certainty, not accuracy. And your intelligence does not live on the surface where those tools can reach. It lives in the spaces between certainty, in the questions no one else is asking, in the silence that follows when everyone else has already decided they know the answer and you are still thinking. You have been told your entire life that intelligence looks like confidence, that it sounds like certainty, that it moves quickly and never looks back and never doubts itself for a single moment. But that is not intelligence. That is performance. That is theater. Real intelligence looks like the man who pauses before he speaks because he is still considering whether what he is about to say is actually true, who questions his own conclusions more rigorously than anyone else would question them, who sees 10 possibilities where others see 1 and feels the weight of each, Who carries the burden of knowing how much he does not know and keeps walking anyway? That is you. Whether you see it or not, whether you believe it or not, whether anyone has ever told you or not, the doubt you carry is not evidence of your limitation. It is the signature of a mind that demands more of itself than the world ever will. And the day you stop interpreting that doubt as weakness and start recognizing it as the engine that drives everything you build, everything you question, everything you create, that is the day you stop underestimating yourself. And that is the day everything changes. As Leonardo da Vinci himself wrote in his notebooks, "The noblest pleasure is the joy of understanding, not the joy of being right, not the joy of being praised, not the joy of winning an argument or impressing a room, the joy of understanding." And the man who finds joy not in having answers but in pursuing questions, not in reaching the destination but in walking the path that man is not behind, he is operating at a level that most people will never reach. Not because they cannot, because they stopped too early. They accepted the first answer and moved on. They settled for the shallow end and called it depth. You did not stop. You kept going. You kept questioning. You kept reaching. And that alone makes you more intelligent than you think. If this is the man you are becoming, the one who carries doubt as fuel, not as a verdict, then you already know more than you give yourself credit for. Subscribe. Stay close. Because this work does not end with one realization, and neither do you.